In the scorching summer of 1894, in the border town of Laredo, Texas, two elderly Mexican women stepped into Dr. Harrison Webb's office and upended everything the medical community believed about aging. Esperanza and Consuelo Valdez were identical 74-year-old twins who had survived wars, epidemics, and the brutal Texas frontier, yet carried themselves like women decades younger, clear-eyed, steady-handed, and without a single gray hair. What Webb discovered during their examination would haunt him, and what the government later uncovered about them would be hidden in classified files for more than a century. The truth was not just impossible, it was unthinkable. Laredo in 1894 was a place caught between the fading Old West and the arrival of modern civilization, where Spanish and English mingled in dusty streets and life was short, violent, and unpredictable. Webb, a Harvard-trained physician, had been in town 3 years, armed with the latest medical tools and a meticulous habit of recording every case. He had treated everything from gunshot wounds to mysterious fevers, but nothing prepared him for the Valdez sisters. The twins lived quietly on 5 acres of flourishing gardens that defied the climate known locally as curanderas, folk healers with a mysterious dialect and knowledge older than the frontier itself. While others whispered about indigenous secrets or the fountain of youth, Webb dismissed such notions as superstition. That changed on July 23, 1894, when Maria Santos burst into his office pleading for help for her fever-ridden infant. The curanderas had sent her a shocking first. At the Santos shack, Webb found the child lifeless on a table flanked by the Valdez sisters, standing in perfect, unsettling symmetry. They spoke in eerily matched tones, their gazes sharp and unblinking. The child's body was arranged with unnatural precision, and Webb noted identical, deliberate scars on each sister's left hand. Then came the invitation, perhaps he should examine them, to learn how they had survived so long in such a harsh place. The way they said it, mocking, challenging, made Webb realize this was no simple matter of folk remedies. Whatever the sisters knew lay far beyond the reach of his textbooks, and it might rewrite everything he believed about the human body. Webb agreed to examine the Valdez sisters, despite every instinct telling him to walk away. His curiosity as a physician overpowered his unease, and 3 days later they arrived at his clinic for what would become the most unsettling medical evaluation of his career. The late afternoon heat was fading, and Laredo's streets were quiet when the twins entered, dressed in plain black, as though in mourning, moving in perfect synchronization. Up close, Webb saw that their skin retained the elasticity of women. Decades younger, their posture flawless, and their eyes bright with unsettling clarity. They invited him to see what his modern science would make of them. What he found defied all medical understanding. Resting heart rates as steady as trained athletes, flawless blood pressure, impressive lung capacity, sharp reflexes, lean muscle tone, and grip strength rivaling women half their age. Their hands showed no signs of arthritis, their bodies bore no marks of aging illness, and their scars precise, deliberate and patterned, as if mapped for anatomy lessons, hinted at a history far stranger than folklore suggested. When asked about the markings, they exchanged a fleeting glance before speaking of a mountain homeland now destroyed by war, where ancient traditions taught complete mastery over the human body. Over the following weeks, Webb ran every test available, measuring lung capacity, reflexes, and examining blood samples that revealed cells unusually robust for their age. Their bone density appeared remarkably strong, despite the lack of modern technology to measure it precisely. Word spread, and by autumn, physicians from across Texas traveled to see them. Dr. Margaret Chen, a rare female physician and expert in traditional healing practices, confirmed Webb's findings, but added new observations. The sisters could regulate their heart rate and blood pressure at will, and their knowledge of anatomy rivaled that of surgeons. When Dr. Chen pressed them on where they learned such advanced understanding, more sophisticated than what was taught in any medical school, the sisters faltered for the first time. Their movements lost their uncanny synchronicity, and an uneasy silence filled the room, as if one question had cracked the careful facade they had maintained for decades. Esperanza's voice was barely a whisper as she told Dr. Chen. "Dr. Chen, one learns many things when survival depends on it, Doctor. When your people face threats unknown to civilized places, you must understand everything about life and death." Chen pressed, "Everything." "What kind of threats?" Consuelo answered without words, at first rolling her sleeve higher, to reveal even more intricate scars, each one deliberate and precise. "Each mark tells a story," she said. "Each mark represents knowledge gained through experience, knowledge you won't find in books or lectures." That night, Chen shared a discovery with Webb that would alter the course of their investigation. In the courthouse archives, she had found references to a vanished mountain settlement called Refugio de las Hermanas, Refuge of the Sisters, hidden in the Sierra Madre of northern Mexico. Records from a Catholic mission, a Mexican military report, and a territorial survey from 1845 all mentioned it, but nothing appeared after 1847, as if it had been erased from history. The documents described a religious community that blended Catholic teaching with indigenous healing traditions, its inhabitants living free from disease, infant mortality, and the early deaths common to the region. Most striking was an 1846 military account of twin healers who possessed uncanny knowledge of the body's secret skills in healing and in killing that defied explanation. Chen suspected they had found the origin of the Valdez sisters' abilities and feared that whatever destroyed the settlement also shaped the women's disturbing relationship with death. Over the next months, Webb and Chen documented everything. How the sisters treated patients, their encyclopedic knowledge of plants, both medicinal and deadly, and the unsettling precision with which they discussed poisons. They could detail the progression of oleander poisoning with cold accuracy, explain how castor beans kill by slow cellular destruction, and describe symptoms of toxins in ways only first-hand observation could produce. Small inconsistencies in their personal history surfaced. They claimed to arrive in Laredo in 1873, but property records proved they had purchased land in 1871. When questioned, they dismissed it as clerical error, though Webb suspected deliberate falsification. In late October, Dr. Samuel Rivera, an expert in forensic medicine, joined the inquiry. Examining the sisters' scars with the precision of a criminal investigator, he found the patterns followed major blood vessels, nerve pathways, and organ locations. These were no ceremonial marks or accidental wounds. They were practice cuts. Someone taught these women anatomy. Rivera concluded grimly by having them carve it into themselves and each other. Their bodies are a living anatomical atlas. The scars on the Valdez sisters' bodies map the human form with chilling precision, arteries, nerve pathways, and the exact locations of vital organs. Most disturbing were the patterns on their hands and wrists, which Rivera recognized as practice cuts for disabling or killing quickly and silently. Whoever trained them, he said grimly, wasn't just teaching how to heal. They were teaching how to harm with surgical efficiency. The investigation soon turned to the sisters' first years in Laredo. Interviews with elderly residents revealed a troubling pattern. Soon after the women arrived in the early 1870s, a series of unexplained deaths swept through the community. Officially attributed to natural causes, these deaths shared a common thread. The victims had questioned the sisters' past, doubted their healing, or tried to look deeper into their history. The breakthrough came when Dr. Chen persuaded Maria Esperanza Ruiz, a longtime acquaintance of the sisters, to speak. In exchange for free treatment of her severe arthritis, Maria confessed that anyone who probed too deeply into the Valdez sisters' background seemed to fall mysteriously ill. The symptoms were always different, but the outcome was the same: death. The sisters never appeared shocked as though they expected it, and at funerals they showed what Maria called scientifica frialdad, a scientific coldness. They always offered to help prepare the bodies, insisting it was their duty as healers. But Maria believed they were examining their handiwork. Other residents, speaking under promises of anonymity, told similar stories. The three physicians were forced to consider the unthinkable, that the sisters were not merely unconventional healers, but skilled practitioners of a deadly art that blended medicine with murder. Rivera's forensic review of 20 years of death records confirmed the suspicions. Mortality among those who had inquired about the sisters was far higher than average, and the causes of death often fit the profile of subtle expert poisoning. Rivera's statistical analysis left little doubt. The deaths look natural, he told Webb and Chen, but they cluster around the same triggers, asking questions about the sisters' past, doubting their methods, or probing into their history. The odds of this being chance are essentially zero. As the winter of 1894 closed in, the three physicians faced an agonizing dilemma. They were convinced that two respected community figures had committed multiple murders over 2 decades. Yet the evidence was entirely circumstantial, their methods so refined that proving guilt with the forensic tools of the time was nearly impossible. That's when fate handed them an unexpected lead. Professor Edmund Hartley, an anthropologist from the University of Chicago, arrived in Laredo to study indigenous cultures of northern Mexico. When Webb shared their findings, Hartley's extensive knowledge of obscure settlements and forgotten histories proved invaluable. Among his notes was mention of a place called Refugio de las Hermanas, whispered about in indigenous communities as El lugar donde murió la paz, the place where peace died. Hartley's research revealed a community founded in the early 1830s by a charismatic Catholic priest who preached isolation from the corrupt outside world. It thrived for years, famed for its agricultural abundance, the apparent absence of disease, and the unusual longevity of its residents. But something catastrophic happened in the winter of 1846-47. Official Mexican Army records described an expedition sent to investigate reports of violence. Soldiers found the settlement intact, but abandoned belongings left behind signs of recent life, yet no living souls. Unofficial accounts painted a darker scene, bloodstains, suggesting dozens dead homes in disarray and a chamber containing human bones arranged with ritualistic precision. The violence these accounts implied had come from within the community, a systematic slaughter carried out by its own inhabitants. Among the soldiers' private letters was one chilling detail mention of a small group who escaped into the mountains, including twin girls skilled in both healing and killing. The implication was undeniable. If Hartley's sources were accurate, Esperanza and Consuelo were not only survivors of a massacre, they may have participated in it. Armed with this knowledge, Webb arranged a private meeting with the sisters under the pretense of a medical follow-up. They arrived on a frigid January night in 1895, dressed in their somber black and moving in perfect unison. But Webb noticed their heightened awareness. Their eyes seemed to weigh every movement in the room. "We understand you've been asking questions about our past, Dr. Esperanza said evenly as they took their seats. "Questions that go beyond medicine. Knowledge spreads." Consuelo added, her gaze locked on Webb. "Sometimes it brings understanding. Sometimes it brings danger." Webb felt his pulse quicken. They knew, and their calm acknowledgement was far more unsettling than anger or denial. "I'm a scientist," he said, forcing his voice steady. "When I see something I don't understand, your longevity, your health, your knowledge, I have to ask questions." It was in that moment that Webb realized the game had shifted. The sisters were no longer the subjects of his investigation. They were now active players in it, and they might already be deciding how it would end. Esperanza's question, "And what have your questions revealed?" Doctor was delivered with a head tilt that made her look less like a frail elder and more like a predator assessing prey. Webb answered plainly he had found references to Refugio de las Hermanas. a vanished mountain settlement in northern Mexico. The silence that followed was sharper than any blade. For the first time, their composure cracked. Esperanza's hand trembled slightly, and Consuelo's eyes flicked toward the door, as if weighing her chances of escape. "You've been asking dangerous questions?" Esperanza warned, her voice low and cold. "Questions that disturb graves better left undisturbed. Sometimes graves need to be disturbed." Webb shot back, surprising himself with the boldness in his voice, especially when they might explain how two women survived what killed an entire community. Consuelo finally answered, her voice barely audible over the wind, rattling the windows. "Survival, doctor, sometimes requires choices that civilized people cannot understand. We faced enemies your world has never known. We learned what was necessary." When Webb demanded to know what enemies required such intimate knowledge of human anatomy, Esperanza rolled up her sleeve. The lamplight revealed an intricate network of scars, not random, but arranged with the precision of a surgical diagram. "Each mark tells a story," she said softly, her tone almost hypnotic. "Knowledge gained through direct experience. How the body works, how it breaks, how it heals, and how it dies." Webb's horror deepened as he realized their skin was a living map of human anatomy. "Who taught you this?" he whispered. The sisters exchanged a glance, and in their eyes he saw no fear, no regret, only the cold calculation of predators who had been exposed but weren't ready to run. "Father Sebastian," Consuelo said at last, her voice laced with both reverence and unease. The name sent Hartley into weeks of obsessive research. His findings were worse than any of them anticipated. Sebastian Valdez, sharing the sister's surname, had been a Catholic priest expelled in 1834 for theological irregularities and practices violating the sacred trust between shepherd and flock. Church records described him as brilliant but unstable, a man who believed that divine understanding required knowing the human body in all its aspects, its suffering, its breaking, and its death. Hartley's contacts in Mexico City provided damning details. Father Sebastian had turned Refugio de las Hermanas into a laboratory of human experimentation under the cover of a religious commune. He handpicked children from his most loyal followers, including twin girls later known as Esperanza and Consuelo, for advanced theological education. But his lessons were horrors in disguise: advanced anatomy, surgical procedures, the preparation and use of poisons and techniques for causing undetectable death. He preached what he called the sacred mysteries of the flesh, demanding that his pupils cut into their own bodies to learn anatomy, test poisons on animals, and according to fragmented testimonies, eventually perform surgeries on living human volunteers from among the most fanatical faithful. The commune thrived outwardly because its members possessed extraordinary medical knowledge. But beneath the surface, it was sustained by cruelty, fanaticism, and the belief that mastery over life and death was a divine calling. Webb's reconstruction of events painted a chilling reality. Father Sebastian's commune had thrived because its members understood the human body better than most trained physicians. But that same mastery made them expert killers. Dissenters, outsiders, or anyone probing too deeply into the settlement's secrets could be silenced without leaving a trace. Heart failure, respiratory collapse, undetectable poisons, each death appearing natural to the primitive forensics of the 1840s. Dr. Chen's discovery of a Mexican Army captain's confessional journal confirmed the most disturbing suspicions. The 1846-47 winter had not been a time of disease or famine. It had been the setting for calculated medicinal murders. The captain described graves filled with bodies showing subtle but deliberate signs of poisoning or surgical intervention, and a ritual chamber whose walls were covered in anatomical drawings alongside records of human experimentation spanning a decade. Bones bore evidence of precise, practiced cuts, the work of someone refining surgical skills on living victims. Chen's grim conclusion was inescapable. The Valdez sisters had been Father Sebastian's finest pupils, trained to heal and kill in equal measure. And the commune's destruction was no outside massacre. It was a purge orchestrated by Sebastian himself to erase witnesses and preserve his most loyal disciples. For 25 years, he and his followers, twins, roamed northern Mexico and the American Southwest, leaving a trail of unexplained deaths before settling in Laredo. The border town, with its trust in traditional healers, weak law enforcement, and transient population, was the perfect hunting ground. Dr. Rivera's forensic review tied at least 30 suspicious deaths in Laredo over 2 decades to the sisters' victims, who had all questioned their past or challenged their authority. The realization hit Webb with a visceral force. He was now one of those people. His investigation had gone too far. On March 15, 1895, Webb took the only step he believed could save his life. He copied all research-sent letters to Chen Hartley Rivera and trusted medical colleagues across Texas and Boston, instructing them to alert federal authorities if he died unexpectedly. He compiled a comprehensive report on the sisters Father Sebastian and the Refugio de las Hermanas commune, sending copies to the Texas Rangers, U.S. Marshals, and Mexican officials. The next morning, Webb awoke violently ill, his symptoms matching those of the mysterious deaths he had studied. But his preparations paid off. Chen received his warning by telegraph and rushed to Laredo with a federal marshal and a military physician skilled in treating rare poisons. Hartley had already mobilized Mexican authorities primed to act on decades-old suspicions. The federal investigation that followed was rapid and relentless. But when U.S. Marshals arrived at the sisters' adobe home on March 18th, they found it immaculate and empty. The Valdez sisters had vanished in the night, leaving behind only their lush garden. Botanical experts quickly identified it as a carefully curated collection of toxic species, deadly nightshade castor beans, oleander, and dozens of other plants no one in South Texas had any reason to grow. It was the clearest sign, yet the women had always been preparing for the next move, and wherever they were headed, their lethal craft would follow. The poisonous garden behind the Valdez sisters' adobe house was more than a healer's plot. It was a laboratory. The arrangement of deadly nightshade, oleander, castor beans, and other toxic species revealed deliberate, systematic cultivation designed for poison production, not legitimate medicine. Beneath the floorboards of the main house, investigators uncovered the single most damning piece of evidence, Father Sebastian's personal journal, written in a blend of Spanish and Latin. It was meticulous, exhaustive, and utterly depraved. Anatomical sketches rivaled those of Europe's best medical schools, while chemical formulas detailed complex poison recipes far ahead of their time. Most chilling was a chronological ledger of over 400 names, each accompanied by a date of death and a method used. This was the complete record of a killing enterprise that had begun at Refugio de las Hermanas and extended for decades across northern Mexico and the American Southwest. The journal revealed the cult's pattern: arrive in an isolated community, earn trust through healing, and quietly eliminate any threat to their secrecy. The final entries, written just weeks before the sisters vanished, listed the names of Dr. Webb, Dr. Chen, Professor Hartley, and Dr. Rivera. It became clear that Father Sebastian, alive and hiding near Laredo for most of the sisters' 20-year residence, had been aware of the investigation and intended to silence them. Webb survived his poisoning by the narrowest margin. Chen's swift action, access to modern medical treatments, and Webb's own contingency planning saved him, though weeks of recovery left him physically weakened. The investigation revealed Sebastian had died of natural causes in late 1894, leaving the sisters to carry on alone. Without his guidance, they made mistakes, sloppy ones by their standards, that drew the attention, leading to their exposure. Despite a manhunt spanning both the United States and Mexico, Esperanza and Consuelo were never caught. Evidence suggested they fled south into Mexico, then west toward the Pacific, possibly securing passage to South America, though this was never confirmed. The official government report filed in summer 18 1895, attributed at least 400 confirmed murders to Father Sebastian and his followers, with the real number likely far higher. Many victims' deaths had been accepted as natural and never investigated. The cult's blend of legitimate medical expertise and mastery of undetectable killing placed them among the most dangerous criminals in recorded history. And only the progress of forensic science and interagency cooperation had finally forced them into the open. But their story didn't end with disappearance. Over the following years, reports surfaced from across Latin America sightings of elderly twin women in remote towns offering their services as healers. The pattern was always the same: arrival in a community desperate for medical aid, rapid integration through skill and apparent compassion, and then inevitably, the slow emergence of mysterious fatal illnesses among those who questioned them. The sisters had not retired. They had simply found new hunting grounds. For the rest of his career, Dr. Harrison Webb tracked the Valdez sisters across the Americas, compiling sightings and coordinating with law enforcement from Mexico to South America. His final report to federal authorities in 1910 concluded that Esperanza and Consuelo were still alive, practicing their lethal trade in isolated South American communities. In his closing statement, Webb rejected the idea that the case was a medical puzzle. Science could not explain the sisters' longevity, he wrote, because it searched for natural causes when the truth was far more sinister. These women extended their own lives by ending the lives of others. Their apparent immortality was built on a hidden graveyard, their preservation purchased through decades of murder disguised as medicine. The Valdez case became a milestone in the evolution of forensic science. Dr. Samuel Rivera's meticulous study of their methods advanced toxicology and the ability to detect previously invisible poisonings. Dr. Margaret Chen's psychological analysis helped establish early frameworks for understanding serial killers, their patterns, motives, and capacity for blending into communities. Professor Edmund Hartley's research into Refugio de las Hermanas became a foundational study in cult psychology, showing how charisma and doctrine could be twisted into a weapon. His work later helped authorities identify and dismantle similar groups before they could repeat such horrors. The case officially remained open until 1925, when the last confirmed sighting placed two elderly Mexican women in a mining town in the Peruvian Andes. They arrived during a typhoid outbreak, cured dozens of patients, and then vanished after several prominent townspeople died under suspicious circumstances. After that, the trail went cold. Whether the sisters finally died, fell victim to regional violence, or perfected their ability to vanish is unknown. The adobe house in Laredo where they had lived became the center of local superstition. Owners tried to turn it into a boarding house, a restaurant, even a hotel. But patrons complained of oppressive air and strange smells during certain weather, as if the soil itself still leaked the chemical memory of decades of poison making. The once manicured garden reverted to wild growth. Yet poisonous species, some not native to Texas, continued to flourish as though the land had been permanently altered by the sisters' cultivation. By the 1920s, the building was abandoned, left to crumble under heat and neglect. Botanists studying the site found that certain toxic plants had naturalized there, persisting without human care. Today, the spot has been built over with a small commercial district in downtown Laredo, its dark history forgotten by most who walk there. The complete medical and investigative records from Webb's work are preserved in the Texas Rangers archives, filed under Unsolved Cases. The boxes hold one of the most detailed criminal investigations ever undertaken in the American Southwest of the 1890s. A record not only of murder, but of the dangerous intersection between knowledge and morality, and of two women who mastered both healing and death. Occasionally, historians of frontier medicine or early forensic science stumble across the Valdez case files and are struck by both the ingenuity of the investigation and the sophistication of the crimes it uncovered. Medical schools still present it as a cautionary lesson in how healing knowledge can be twisted into a weapon, while law enforcement agencies use it to illustrate the value of interagency cooperation when pursuing complex, multi-jurisdictional cases. Yet the question that haunted Dr. Webb until his death in 1932 still lingers. How many others did Father Sebastian train? Could there be more of his students, men or women, who quietly carried their lethal expertise into other unsuspecting communities? And in our modern age of advanced medical technology and instant global communication, could a similar deception still be possible? With modern tools such as DNA analysis and computer-assisted crime pattern recognition, some researchers are revisiting clusters of suspicious deaths from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, searching for traces of Sebastian's disciples hidden in plain sight. If other practitioners of his deadly arts did exist, their work may still be buried in dusty death records, misclassified as natural causes. The story of Esperanza and Consuelo Valdez remains a chilling reminder that the deadliest monsters often wear the face of trust. They were not supernatural beings, but human women taught from childhood that survival justified any act, no matter how cruel, and who honed the art of killing under the guise of healing for decades. Their longevity was not the gift of magic, but the product of removing any threat before it could shorten their lives. Their remarkable vitality came not from mystical herbs or divine blessing, but from meticulous planning, ruthless efficiency, and an unflinching willingness to kill. Perhaps most unsettling of all is the fact that their healing was real. The tragedy lay not in fraud, but in the duality of their nature. They could save a life with the same skill and precision they used to take one. The people of Laredo trusted them because they delivered genuine cures, never suspecting the darker calculus hidden beneath. The Valdez sisters' story endures as a warning. The most dangerous knowledge is that which can serve both good and evil, and the greatest evil often hides behind the greatest good. Whether their trail truly ended in the Andes or vanished deeper into the shadows remains a mystery, and perhaps one we are not meant to solve.